Hello, friends. Today I will show you a story about how trust in intimate relationships is shaped by duty and obligation. The scene centers on a confession room, a single amber bulb and a sealed envelope resting on a quiet table. Beyond that seal lies a vow and a set of quiet costs that history forgot to mention. Watch closely. The confession room glows with a single amber bulb. A late evening hush wraps the apartment, the ocean far enough to be heard only as a memory. On the table sits a sealed envelope, its waxed seal pristine, a quiet vow in a world of noise. Alex leans forward, calm but with a tremor he won't name. He slides the envelope a half-inch toward the center, like he is nudging a volatile truth into the open. Alex, we're not here to chase headlines. I'm launching a project to map how trust in intimate relationships is shaped by duty and obligation. We will invite Jordan, Mira, and Dr. Reed to participate. With consent as the first rule, not a final sentence. Mira sits back, the chair creaking as if resisting the weight of what she's about to hear. She doesn't touch the envelope. Her eyes remain on Alex, wary but curious. Mira, the premise is honorable, but I've learned that intimacy and subjects don't stay private when a camera is in their face. If the audience pushes for raw truth, we risk becoming a machine for spectacle. The envelope is not a shield. It's a door, one I don't trust to stay closed. Elias's pen hovers over a notebook, the sound almost ceremonial. He speaks with measured care, the mind of an ethicist turned witness. Dr. Reed. Consent is not a barrier to truth. It is the scaffold that keeps truth from becoming harm. We must anchor every disclosure in explicit agreement, and reframing is not censorship. It's care. The costs of exposure aren't abstract in this room. Jordan, quiet for a count of heartbeats, studies the seal on the envelope as if it might answer questions without words. His voice is low, steady, a shield of loyalty around him. Jordan, I came to protect the bond we have, not to turn it into a case study. Boundaries aren't walls to hide behind. They're the terms we agree to live by. If that means some truths stay private, so be it. The room breathes, tension tightening like a drawn string. The envelope becomes the center of gravity, a symbol that makes the debate intimate, almost tactile. Alex's hands lift and lower, tracing the edge of the paper as if daring the order to be kept or broken. Doubt is still there, but a decision is forming, cautious and bright as a lamp switch. Alex, I've learned that duty can guard trust, but it can also poison it if it pretends there is only one way to be honest. So we'll begin with a consent-first framework. No material disclosed without explicit, verifiable permission. No context that would re-traumatize. And a published plan that invites ongoing participation in the process. Mira nods slowly, a spark of resolve appearing behind the professional mask. Mira, if we commit to that, we also commit to documenting the negotiation, the way truth travels through care, not just through exposure. Elias closes his notebook with a soft rustle. Dr. Reed. Then we test the threshold of what we can share, what we can reframe, and what must remain sacrosanct. Not a retreat from truth, but a path that makes truth durable. Jordan looks at Alex, a small tremor in his stance, uncertainty wavering toward resolve. Jordan, if we're doing this, we do it together. And if the cost is real, we acknowledge it. Every step. The envelope catches a glimmer of the lamp, a quiet reminder of what's at stake. The room seems to lean in, listening for a final word. Alex meets their eyes, breath steady, the weight shifting from fear to a fragile, provisional courage. Alex. So, What compromise between truth and ethics will we choose? The question lingers as the light holds, and the room holds its breath, awaiting an answer that isn't there yet. The confession room hummed with a quiet intensity, the neon spill from the corridor softening into a pale glow on the table, where a single rolled parchment lay next to a tablet. Mira folded her arms, her gaze riveted on Elias as if he might slip a trap into the air. He stood with the edge of the door frame between him and the room, not hiding the muscles in his jaw as he traced the inked lines on the map. The map wasn't dramatic, just a schematic of routes, labeled in careful strokes. Consent tiers, contextual labels, subject control points. It felt like a roadmap rather than a battlefield. Mira's eyes flicked to it, then to Elias. "We're not chasing a scandal," she said, voice low but hard. "We're chasing truth that won't fracture the very people we claim to honor." Elias met her in the middle of the table, palms resting on the parchment as if to steady it. "And them. Consent is a relationship, Mira, not a checkbox. If we mark something as reconstruction, we must declare it plainly. How and why, and who agreed to see it that way. Otherwise, the audience fills in the gaps with sensation." She shook her head slightly, as if almost smiling at his stubborn precision. "Or the subjects begin to disappear behind the labels. How do we know the line between care and erasure isn't just a line you're comfortable drawing for them?" The dominant force in the room shifted then, a quiet pivot. A choice. Not the kind that clings to authority, but the kind that invites risk with open palms. Elias softened. The roadmap isn't control. It's guardrails. It says, we don't publish without explicit, ongoing consent. We annotate every scene with its reality, reconstructed or not, and we invite subjects to revise or withdraw. He paused, letting the word withdraw hang between them like a door not yet opened. Mira looked at the map as if it might offer mercy. "A roadmap that makes room for the unknown," she said, almost to herself. "That's the only map that feels honest." Her voice dropped. "But it will slow us. It will ask more of the subjects, more of us." The room seemed to lean in, the soft light catching the edge of the parchment, revealing the word that neither had spoken aloud, but both could feel. Responsibility. A muted sigh escaped Mira's lips. "No sensationalism," she whispered, almost as a vow rather than a demand. "No framing that treats truth like a cliff to jump off for the camera." Elias inclined his head. "No cliff, only a boundary, clearly marked, negotiated, revisited." He looked at Mira, then at the door, as if listening for a knock on the other side, where the subjects might be waiting with their own questions and limits. The symbol appeared again, organic and unforced. The ethical roadmap, a tangible breath between them. It wasn't triumph, but an agreement to walk slowly, to ask before showing, to name the costs of truth as clearly as its shapes. A small, quiet freedom settled in the room. And yet a question lingered, answered only by the air itself. How do we mark a reconstruction so that the truth feels earned, not imposed? The map glowed faintly, as if answering with a soft whisper to the unanswered question, leaving the room in a thoughtful stillness that refused to resolve what must remain in negotiation. The confession room glows softly under a single, spare lamp. On the scarred table rests a small, cold lock and key sculpture, the metal catching the light with a quiet promise. A rolled parchment labeled "Consent Tiers" sits beside a tablet, its screen dark but patient. Jordan sits opposite Alex, the distance between them measured in breath and eye contact. Mira and Elias linger at the doorway, guardians of the frame, not the pulse. Jordan shifts, the chair creaking. Closeness isn't the casualty here, Alex. It's the prize. But it's earned, not gambled away. If we keep turning disclosures into a test of devotion, we'll prove nothing but how fast fear travels. Alex's fingers tap the table, hesitant. I've believed trust grows when you choose to tell what you owe, not when you defer what hurts. I'm not asking for sensational exposure. I'm asking for the courage to be seen. Mira's gaze flicks to the parchment, then to Elias. She says softly, "Consent isn't a cage. It's a map, a way to translate care into action." Her voice is careful, the professional shield slipping into a collaborative shade. Elias steps closer, measured, almost clinical in care. Truth in relationship is relational. It costs. If we proceed, it must be explicit, labeled, and revisited. Otherwise, we're re-traumatizing with pretty lighting. The room tightens, as if the walls listen. Jordan leans forward, the line between protectiveness and possessiveness blurring. The choice we make here is the real test. Do we protect the closeness by withholding, or do we preserve it by clarifying what we share and why? The key is consent, not hiding the lock. Alex's eyes drift to the lock and key. The symbol settles on him like a question made of metal. If the key stays with us, we decide what turns it. But turning it means consequences. For Jordan, for the project, for every person we've asked to trust us with their life. Jordan looks at him, a stubborn mentor and a partner. Then we choose to lock in something else. A framework that respects your past, my present, and the project's future. Not silence, but safe disclosure. Mira nods, her posture relaxing into collaboration. Consent tiers, contextual labels, subject control points. If we reconstruct, we label it. If we reveal, we pause for consent again. The audience will know the map we've chosen to follow. Elias adds, a quiet hinge of certainty. Relational ethics demand that the act of truth-telling become a shared act of care. We measure risk with care, not curiosity. The parchment unfurls on the table as if drawn by a breeze that only the room can sense. Alex fixes his gaze on the words, a tremor threading his voice into resolve. If the path is consent-based, I can stand by a version of myself that's not certain every truth will be poured out. But every truth will be offered with a clear invitation to receive and respond. Jordan touches the lock with deliberate gentleness, lifting the key and letting the metal cool against the palm of the hand. We don't erase danger. We bind it with responsibility. We choose to tell, only when told to tell, and to name why. That choice, this choice, changes the game. The room seems to exhale. The walls soften and the neon rain outside leaks into the space, as though the city itself is listening to this pact. The team speaks in calmer tones, drafting phrases in their minds. Consent tiers, contextual labels, subject control points. No longer abstract jargon, but living protocol. Alex meets Jordan's eyes, a shard of doubt melting into determination. If closeness survives this, it won't be because we hid. It will be because we learned to ask for permission to share and to hear the answer before we move. Jordan smiles, thin, wary, almost wary enough to be hopeful. Then we keep the lock and key, but we keep them in a drawer that we open together. Mira's breath tightens with a quiet, almost relieved affirmation. The roadmap sits here, she says, tapping the parchment, not as a rule book to police us, but as a living consent protocol we all own. Elias steadies his glasses, a final echo of ceremony. We proceed with care, and we revisit. Always. The scene narrows to a shared breath, a tentative agreement, and the soft click of a decision settling into place. The lock is never opened to force. The key remains a question, offered and accepted in equal measure. And then, as if the room itself asks the question aloud, a single line lingers in the air, unanswerable and true. Can closeness endure when every truth must be granted permission first? Rain drums against the confession room window, a soft constant that makes the room feel smaller, closer. A single lamp pools pale light over a table where a sealed envelope rests like a patient secret. On the diffuser of the wall, a checklist glows. Consent tiers, contextual labels, subject control points. Jordan stands by the door, a quiet hinge of boundary between room and hallway. Mira watches from the threshold, Elias at her shoulder, both lenses trained on Alex, the gravity of a choice leaning into the air. Alex breathes in. The breath fogs the glass, then clears. The memory arrives not as a scene, but as a weight. Weight of rain, weight of a decision that kept someone safe by burying the truth. He can hear a hospital corridor in the back of his skull, feel the glow of a life saved, and the price paid in quiet. He says nothing, yet the words gather in his throat, a small storm. The sealed envelope sits between his hands and trembles with him. He remembers the moment when silence felt like protection, not cowardice. A name withheld, a danger spared, a truth tucked away to spare fear or harm. The guilt is not loud. It's a precise ache, like a narrow blade pressed gently into skin. He looks at the envelope as if it might answer for him, might absolve or condemn with the same motion. Jordan's hand lands on the doorframe, a subtle reminder that the door is still a boundary even as the room grows thinner with pressure. Closeness is earned, Alex, she says softly. Consent makes honesty possible without erasure. Her voice does not demand a confession. It invites a process, a pace, a form. Mira shifts closer. Elias steps forward, not to push, but to calibrate the cost. Alex lifts his gaze, mouth dry. I want to tell the truth, he says, and the words catch on the space between desire and duty. But I won't break the pact we've built here. Not without consent, not with drama dressed as candor. He traces the envelope with a finger, then leaves it untouched. The question hangs, heavier than the lamp's glow. What truth is worth telling when the past's breath still trembles in someone's life? He does not answer it, not yet. Instead, he meets the room's hush with a vow to seek a path where truth can be spoken with care, where the past becomes a guide, not a weapon. The rain continues to fall, and the door remains slightly ajar, inviting, not forcing, the next step. The confessional room hums softly, rain tracing a thin line down the window. A single lamp pools pale gold on the table, where a folded slip lies beside a small, stubborn object. A crisp, pale yellow note labeled Dissident Note. Elias steps in first, calm, the weight of a verdict behind his eyes. Alex follows, shoulders squared, but not relaxed. His hands betray him, curling, then loosening. Elias. Neutral questions pretend to protect. They absolve us of responsibility for what a truth might do. Alex. And they pretend we're not choosing to tell a story at all. If every question is a shield, what kind of truth do we publish? Elias moves closer, not arguing so much as offering a different map. He taps the note gently. Elias. This note is a dissent, not a distraction. It demands consent, care, and if necessary, silence. The question isn't whether we can ask. It's who bears the cost of answering. Alex's mouth tightens. Doubt flickers, then steadies into a stubborn resolve. Alex, Pain is not a bug to be avoided. It's a signal. We've promised honesty, but not at the expense of someone's safety. If we're to confess, we must earn it, through framing, consent, and boundaries, not raw exposure. Elias's gaze sharpens, yet there's a flicker of curiosity, as if weighing a different gravity. Elias, so we redefine truth as relational, not forensic. What counts as truth when you can't just press play and reveal everything? Alex steps to the table, runs a cautious finger along the edge of the note, as if feeling the words tremble beneath the surface. Alex, we choose a framework. Consent tiers, contextual labels, subject control points. We publish with care, not with climate control. The choice is the dominant act here. We choose what to reveal and to whom, when, and how. The note catches a glint from the lamp. It seems to pulse with a dissenting heartbeat. Alex's voice lowers, almost to a confession. Alex, if I'm to speak, I'll speak with permission. If I'm to reveal, I'll reveal under terms that protect the vulnerable, not the drama. Elias nods once, deliberate. He breaks the spell with a practical breath. Elias, then we test the choice. We document the ask, the consent, the boundaries. And if the cost is too steep, we pause. That is responsibility, not retreat. The air thickens, the tension sharpening into a precise edge. The camera, the implicit partner in this scene, holds on the dissident note, its creases catching the light like a paused heartbeat. A pause, then a small, almost reluctant smile from Elias. Elias, truth has no ritual of martyrdom here. It travels with care. Alex meets the offer, a steadying breath crossing his face. Alex, we choose to ask, to wait, to frame. We choose to protect, even when truth could sting. The question lingers between them, unspoken and unresolved. As the rain continues its patient tapping, the dissident note seems to breathe with them, a symbol that truth is a choice. Necessary, painful, and finely bound by consent. Rain taps the glass of the confession room, a thin drizzle that sounds like a tired rumor. The sealed envelope sits upright on the tablet, beside the faint glow of the consent tiers and contextual labels. Alex stands between the chair and the door, Mira at his left shoulder, Jordan by the doorway, like a quiet hinge. The air is damp with memory and the slow ache of indecision. The memory comes as a breath, not spoken, but already here, of a night when truth would have cut deeper than the wound it would heal. A life saved by silence, a harm that lingered because a truth remained unsaid. The envelope feels heavier than paper, heavier than duty. Alex, the origins of honesty aren't clean, are they? They stain the hands that reach for them. Mira, we're not here to drag old colors into new light unless we can label them, consent them, and handle them with care. The envelope is a symbol, not a weapon. Jordan shifts, the boundary hinge. His voice is low, not unkind. Jordan, closeness is earned, not owed. If a truth would redraw the past and fracture the present, we pause. A beat. The room holds its breath as a memory flickers. Firelight in a hospital corridor, a choice made in fear of a worse fate. A silence chosen because it protected one person at a steep cost to another. Alex, if I tell it as it happened, it becomes an accusation against my past self. If I leave it out, I'm still complicit in the harm that followed. The question isn't only what truth is owed, but how it can be carried without breaking what remains. Mira steps closer, her voice careful but firm. Mira, the boundary protocol isn't a wall, it's a map. We draft the exact terms under which any piece of this history can be shared. Consent tiers, contextual labels. every fragment weighed by who it belongs to and how it travels. Alex reaches for the envelope, but his fingers hover, unsure whether to tear or leave intact. A memory resurfaces as if a door were opening behind him. The implicated moment, the look of relief in one face, the distant ache in another. The memory presses, but the envelope's seal does not yield. Alex, if we release something, it should be earned, not dumped. The audience will read it as truth, but truth without context is a weapon or a cure, depending on who wields it. I can name the weight, just not the impulse to lay it bare, unless we can name the terms of care. Jordan, then name them, now. If we can't, we stay with the question and the pause. Mira, we define the points where a memory becomes shareable. Consent checks, subject-led framing, and per-piece labeling. We document every stage. Reconstructed scenes will be clearly marked as such. The envelope rests on the table again, its silence a response, not a verdict. The rain outside softens, the neon spill turning the room into a quiet rumor of color. Alex. So the past can be told, but on terms. Not in a torrent, but in a measured stream. Jordan nods, wary but present. Mira. Consent is the hinge. The truth we tell will travel only as far as its consent travels with it. The room narrows to a single breath of decision. The envelope remains, a symbol of what must be handled with care. And yet the question lingers, unspoken but insistent. Which fragment of history deserves the telling? And how shall we frame it so that no one is harmed more than necessary? The confessional room hums with a soft neon flicker. Mira steps back from the table where the rigid lines once lay, a map of boundaries pressed into the air like a blade. On the surface lies the ethics book, its spine worn, a quiet authority that feels almost human tonight. Alex sits with a pen poised above his notebook, eyes half on Mira, half on the pages of a printed consent framework she has just slid across to him. The notes shimmer with careful language. Consent notes, context labels, subject control points. A room of soft sounds, a breath before a decision. Mira's voice stays even, but the warmth has sharpened at the edges. This project doesn't need to be brutal, to be honest. We can tell the truth and still shelter the people in it. If empathy is the backbone, consent is the spine. Elias nods, steady as a lamp. We codify care without muting sensitivity. The voice can be true and tender at once. Jordan, stationed near the door, studies the wall in a way that weighs every possibility. Not a judge, just a boundary keeper watching how the room answers. Alex looks from the book to Mira. You're asking us to choose not just what to reveal, but how to frame it, where to pause, who gets to speak ahead of time. He sighs, a knot loosening somewhere he didn't know was tight. If we bind the truth to consent, do we still call it truth? Mira's gaze softens. Yes, but truth travels through care. Look at the page we kept open. Contextual labels. A memory shifts when we name the context, give subject care a voice, and invite consent before reconstructing scenes. She slides the book closer, as if offering a shared compass. Alex takes a breath that feels like stepping onto a new floor. He taps a fingertip along the edge of the notes. Jordan's eyes stay on the doorway, but the tension in the room eases, a thread moving. The camera catches the moment, the soft click of a bookmark, the imprint of authority turned into invitation. The ethics book remains, not a rule book, but a quiet partner. Alex's mouth settles into a careful line. We choose to tell with consent. We choose to map the trust that isn't a trap. For a heartbeat, the room seems ready to breathe. Then Mira picks up a pen and writes a single line on a fresh page. A pact, not a gate. But the last question lingers, unspoken and heavy in the neon air. How can empathy persist without becoming sensational? The confessional room hummed with a quiet neon glow, the consent notes sheet catching the light as if it were a small, stubborn moon. The table between them bore the weight of a dozen decisions already made and a few still unsettled. Mira stood with the binder open, eyes steady, the new protocol laid out like a map anyone could misread. Alex leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low but not quiet enough to be private. If we publish these wounds raw, we become the wound. People we care about, Jordan, Mira's subjects who trusted us, will bear it. Mira didn't blink. She tapped the consent notes with a careful finger. This isn't about softening truth. If we can't publish without a consent framework that anyone could opt into, then we don't publish the most painful truths tonight. Not without explicit permissions, not without labeling. He glanced at Mira, the line between them drawn in light and tension. Mira allowed a small smile, not triumph, just acknowledgement. Consent, first, isn't a veto. It's a process, a way to keep the human safe while still telling something true. The room settled, as if a gust had passed and left a clearer air. Alex's gaze drifted to the consent notes again, then to Elias, then to Jordan. The weight shifted from doubt toward something steadier, a resolve born of earned clarity. The door squeaked faintly, a reminder of the world outside pressing in, hungry for headlines. The sense of pressure rose, not a chorus, but a single note. The dominant choice now resting on their collective shoulders. To proceed only if consent holds, visibly labeled, and responsibility shared. Then we proceed with the protocol, Alex said, voice steadier. Not tonight for the hardest scene, unless the subject themselves lifts the safety switch. Mira closed the binder with a soft click. Consent notes, context labels, subject control points. They stay in play. We monitor, we pause, we label, we reframe. Jordan uncrossed and uncable-boundarily eased. Not surrender, but readiness. Elias opened his notebook as if to write a clause into the wind. A promise that care precedes exposure. The question hovered, unspoken but clear in the last glance they exchanged. Who really decides what to publish when truth must be earned with consent? The air held it, suspended, as they turned the plan toward the door, toward a version of trust that required a choice every time. The confessional room glows with a soft neon, the kind that makes the carpet seem damp with rain even when the windows are shut. On the table, a slim binder labeled Consent Notes lies open, its pages fissured with handwritten terms, checkboxes, and a single stubborn stamp. Context labels. Mira sits across from Alex, calm as a lighthouse, while Elias watches with a physician's patience, and Jordan remains just outside the glass, the boundary that hums with silent caution. Alex leans in, shoulders crooked with doubt. I want to tell you something I've learned to keep quiet about, under this project's terms. His voice is even, then thinner, as if the room itself is listening. Before I say it, I want your consent to hear it. Ask if I may speak the memory and how you'd like it framed. He glances at Mira, who nods once, precisely. He glances at Elias, who tilts his head, a signal to proceed, but with care. Then his eyes settle on the consent notes again, as if the binder itself is a witness. The room grows narrower, intimate in the way a heartbeat can be when someone's about to do something dangerous and necessary. Alex breathes, and the breath feels like a hinge turning. There was a choice I made not to tell the truth, he says, and the words come out in a cautious river. To protect you, to protect us, to protect the project from a moment that could have collapsed everything we've built. He pauses, searching their faces for permission to go further. Mira's expression remains soft, not softening the truth, but shaping it into safer air. Consent notes, she says evenly, keeping the symbol in view, is not permission to lie. It's permission to tell truth with responsibility. The phrase lands between them like a note dropped into water. No splash, just a ripple. Alex continues. In the memory, I withheld a truth that could have changed a decision, a danger I could have faced by speaking sooner, not because I didn't care, but because I believed silence could keep us intact, that the bond, the trust, would endure if I controlled what was known. He speaks those words as if they're weights he's finally learned how to lift. The cost wasn't just risk to others. It was the risk of becoming someone who believes truth is a tool you use only when it's safe. A beat of silence. The hum of equipment. The rain-slick city outside threads through the glass, the neon bleeding into the room in a soft, fugitive red. Elias leans forward, voice careful. Truth framed by consent is not relapse into sensationalism. It's a discipline. We're not asking you to spew raw exposure. We're asking you to tell it with care, to label, to contextualize, to check back for harm. His eyes meet Alex's with a clinician's exactness. And yet, there's a gentleness there that Alex hadn't expected from a man who speaks of ethics, like architecture. Mira offers the turn that the scene demands. This is the moment the consent framework was built for. To acknowledge vulnerability without theatrics, to honor pain without weaponizing it. If you tell with explicit permission, the kind you can't fake, the kind you earn. The memory racks against a memory of its own. Alex's past fear that truth would demolish the bonds he loves. He feels it rise, not as a shout, but as a tremor under the skin. And then the hinge of choice settles. He does not pull back. He breathes out, a measured sigh that seems to release a held breath from years ago. Then I'll speak, he says, and the words are slow, deliberate. Not because I want the world to hear, but because I want us to trust the act of listening. He looks at Jordan's quiet figure beyond the door, then back at Mira, at Elias, at the binder with its crisp page edges and the stamp that feels like a vow. He taps the page of consent notes with a fingertip, a soft percussion against the quiet. I withheld the truth to spare someone I care about from harm, he admits, the admission itself a movement from doubt toward a fragile resolve. The choice saved a moment, perhaps saved a life. But it did so by erasing another part of the truth. I didn't want to pull the thread and watch the fabric unravel. He lifts his chin, a small, honest gesture. I wasn't free to tell then. I'm choosing now to tell in a way we can all bear, with consent, with labeling, with accountability. The words hang, warm and dangerous, like a match near kindling. There's relief in the room. A soft combustion of relief that's almost unnoticeable, because it's tempered, controlled by the very system he's learned to trust. The consent notes lie open, a line drawn across the page, an unspoken agreement and a visible symbol that the truth has now passed through a gate. Jordan shifts at the door, not stepping in, but listening, a living boundary that respects the moment's gravity. Mira's eyes meet Alex's, and there, thin as a thread, runs the new certainty. Truth doesn't have to burn to prove itself. It can be confessed, labeled, and carried forward with care. The question remains, however. The air itself seems to ask it as much as any mouth. Can the truth endure when spoken under consent? The room holds still, the neon glancing off the glass like a watched clock, and the memory of what was kept quiet lingers, now tempered with a promise. Truth, when shared through care, might not set a room aflame, but it can light a path. The confessional room hummed with a soft neon glow, the kind that makes every memory tilt toward honesty. On the table lay the consent notes binder, its spine pressed flat like a vow. Beside context labels and a slim sheet titled Subject Control Points. Outside, rain stitched the glass with a quiet percussion. Inside, a tension that felt almost domesticated. Alex sits straight but not stiff. Sleeves rolled up, the memory of a shield still hovering behind his gaze. Mira sits opposite, not over him, but between him and the room, her posture a calm bridge. Elias stands by the corner, clipboard in hand, the weight of ethics in his calm breath. Jordan is by the door, a pale figure framed by corridor light, boundary and listening in one silhouette. The air shifts when the door chimes softly, and no one glances toward it. They have rehearsed silence as a tool. Today they practice it with a purpose. Alex speaks first, quiet but precise. We finalize the consent first protocol tonight. I speak under explicit permission. No memory, no detail, no moment, spoken without a check. His voice steadies on the word check, as if to steady himself. Mira's eyes drift to the binder, then back to him. Consent is not a cage, Alex. It's the only bridge we've got to trust that won't shatter when the room goes quiet and the world starts listening. Elias nods, setting the clipboard down. The context labels will tag every moment with intention, not sensation. The protocol isn't about withholding truth. It's about choosing the truth that preserves care. Jordan shifts, the glass boundary between them catching a sliver of his doubt. He doesn't interrupt. He absorbs the room's gravity, letting the word boundary land between him and the others. Alex leans forward, the doubt in his eyes thinning to a resolute line. I won't surrender responsibility to sensationalism. If the memory is to be told, it must arrive wearing a consent note, explicitly approved, every strain of it acknowledged. He reaches for the binder, slides a finger along the page where consent notes is printed in a careful, almost ceremonial font. Mira's hand hovers above the table, then rests on the binder as if some unseen mechanism clicked into place. This is our shift from telling to choosing who and how truth enters the frame. The consent notes are a promise. You may speak, but you speak with permission, and only what permission allows. Elias magnets the moment with a clinical warmth. We'll seal the memory with care. The subject control points become our guardrails. If any disclosure risks the well-being of a subject, we walk away. This is relational truth, not transactional exposure. The room settles into a rhythm that feels almost ceremonial. Alex places his pen down, then lifts the consent notes binder as if presenting a small, sacred artifact. He signs his name with deliberate care, each stroke an act of choosing to be held to a standard higher than fear. Jordan's voice breaks the silence, soft and deliberate. I'll honor the boundaries here. If the door ever feels like a breach, we reset the frame. He steps back, not retreating, merely reinforcing the perimeter of safety. A quiet breath travels through the table. The context labels are affixed, a map of scenes, a map of consent. The subject control points are ticked in with careful ink. The last page is turned. The protocol feels cumulative, almost tangible, a new contract written in ordinary ink. Alex looks up, meeting Mira's steady gaze. So, this is what trust requires. A constant, explicit yes. Not a withheld memory, not a guarded truth, but a negotiated truth that keeps care alive, even when the world knocks. Mira answers with a gentle firmness. Yes. And when the industry leans in, hungry, We lean back toward this table and remember the choice we made here. The air thickens with the weight of the decision and the thin, bright thread of resolve. The symbol, consent notes, seems to glow a touch brighter, as if the binder itself exhaled a sigh of relief. For a beat, they listen to the rain, to the clock in the corner measuring the moment in patient ticks. The question hovers, unspoken yet palpable. Can they hold this line when publication pressure roars and the memory still tugs at their throats? The room answers with action, not spectacle. The team stands together, not as saviors or victims, but as co-authors of a new trust. The door remains closed, but the boundary feels porous with accountability. And in the quiet, the memory waits, not dismissed, but reframed, waiting for explicit consent to enter again. The question stays in the air, a thin thread of possibility and risk. Will trust endure the next test, when the world demands its truth and nothing less?